welcome to All Around the Town on your TV. I'm Catherine Hanrahan, and we are temporarily rebranding this show, or maybe nicknaming the show to Zooming Around the Town, very apropos in this day and age, so that we can all stay home and stay healthy and be well. I would really like to thank our guest today. We're talking to Christian Harvey. Christian is the Executive Director of One City Peterborough. Hey, Christian, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me, Catherine.
From my understanding, One City Peterborough is a relatively newer organization, but it's an amalgamation of some services that we're already kind of familiar with.
Exactly. Yeah. So what happened was Warming Room Community Ministries, which oversaw Warming Room, One City Employment Program, One Roof Community Center, merged with another organization called Peterborough Reintegration Services to become One City Peterborough. Because what we felt was that our mission, though we worked with different people, our mission was very much the same, and that was to create a community where everyone had a place. And so it was a really exciting conversation, and eventually we found, you know what, we would do better together than apart.
And when did this happen?
This
The
happened,
amalgamation.
yeah, it was over a period of time, but really in November of last year was when kind of there was official steps taken, and we really relaunched in January of 2020.
Okay. I think a lot of people were really familiar with the warming room and the
Mhm.
services that were provided by the warming room, but it's something that's, I mean, it came up with some huge challenges last year. Do
For
you want to
sure.
talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so last year was a really hard year, especially for the shelter warming room, and in the summertime, in July 1st, we had to close our doors because we no longer had a location, and that was a really difficult time for us, and it really it caused us to really rethink some things of what is it that we're going to continue to do, because we knew we weren't going away. So as we began to talk to individuals who are experiencing homelessness, as we began to wrestle with who are we to become, what we heard time and time again was that what we want is creative housing solutions. We want somewhere to live. Shelter is important, and it's one of those things that in between homelessness and housing, there needs to be somewhere where people can be safe and have a roof over their heads. But housing is what we need, and we need some creative solutions. And so One City really committed itself to that, to finding creative solutions to housing, and then just offering different services that help people reintegrate into or integrate into the community.
What are some of those services? I think
Yeah.
we see the challenge of homelessness, and it just seems like there are so many barriers. So what are some of the services you're offering to help get people past that?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're offering right now is we have a housing program where we own a couple houses ourselves, and we also partner with landlords, and we kind of provide nonprofit property management. And so by doing that, we're able to. One of the things we found was that there's lots of landlords who wanted to be a part of the solution, but it felt really overwhelming to them. They realized they didn't have the skills that they might need to serve a complicated population. And so what we decided was, why don't we get involved, and the landlords kind of provide the house and we manage it for them. In some of those houses, we also provide supports for individuals so that individuals can be supported in their housing. And in some, we find other organizations to provide the supports. But we make sure that people in our housing are supported and are helped in the journey from homelessness to housing, because it can be quite a journey. There can be a lot of obstacles to that. And so we want to make sure that we're journeying with them in that, and sort of have a landlord who's working with them to make sure that they're successful. So that's one of our services when it comes to homelessness. And when it comes to, but our other foci is on helping people reintegrate from prison. And so, because we also find, and those things are interconnected, right? So many people exit prison and then have no options and become homeless. So we're like, we want to hit both those. So we have two programs that really work towards supporting individuals coming out of prison. One of those programs is Haley House, which is a halfway house for individuals coming out of federal prison who struggle with mobility issues, who are elderly, or who are palliative, which means they're dying. So we have a house that, and what it is to allow these gentlemen, many of whom have spent most of their lives in prison, to have a dignified time as they near the end. And it's a really cool place. It's amazing because I was talking to a few of the guys, and they were so pumped this winter to get a garden going, right? And so because they'd been in for so long, and gardening was not something they would ever get to do, right? And so they had this basically greenhouse in our back room of the house, and had prepped, and now they're out there just getting this garden going, and it's beautiful. And the way in which they've interacted with nature, something that they didn't get to do much inside, it's just really exciting. So Haley House is dedicated to that. And then we have another program called Circles of Support and Accountability. And what Circles of Support and Accountability does is it works with individuals who've been charged with sexual offenses. One of the things we know about individuals who've charged with sexual offenses is that what puts people at greatest risk of reoffending is feeling isolated, feeling lonely, feeling pushed aside. And then often, though, as a community, that's exactly how we treat individuals who've been charged with sexual offenses. And by doing so, we actually make the whole community less safe. And so our goal is to create both support and accountability for individuals who have been charged with sexual offenses. So we come around them, we have circles of people who support them and also hold them accountable. And so as that individual sets goals for not reoffending, for moving forward, there's individuals who are there to support them in reaching those goals, and also saying, hey, I think maybe you're falling off the track here. How might we, you're falling into maybe some old patterns that could lead down a really dangerous path for everyone. How can we make sure this doesn't happen?
A new landlord or a new homeowner coming on board with the program, how do you choose who gets to live there?
Yeah, and that's a really interesting question, because it's something that we're always sort of refining more and more. But one of the things that we're trying to work towards, and sometimes able to achieve well and sometimes not, is how do we create communities? How do we create, so most of our houses, we have one that's larger, but most of our houses are about 4 bedrooms, because we find that allows for greater community to be built. And in that, we try and put together as much as we can individuals who want to live together. When we were in college, we chose roommates who we wanted to live with, right? Because that's easier. When you're thrown together with individuals that you have no choice in, and you're forced to share washrooms, kitchens, all those sorts of things, that can be pretty rough. And so what we're trying to do is really create communities. We partner also with other organizations who provide support. So sometimes we look for individuals who will live well together, and we put them together and support them in that. Other times we partner with organizations who then they have individuals who they're supporting, who they would bring in. So it's a sort of a both and.
And are these people who are currently, are they going directly from the shelter system straight to, now you have a house?
That is our hope, right? That in our best case scenario, that's what we're doing is taking people out of the shelter system and housing them right away into housing. And again, individuals need support in that journey because it's not an easy journey, right? And so we're with them, and those individuals that we support have volunteers who are connected to those individuals, who are there just to have. It's good to have people who aren't paid to be there, who have your best interest in mind. So who are checking in on you. It's kind of like the big sister, right? Who's constantly checking in on you, make sure you're okay, make sure things are going okay. So we want to utilize the whole community to be wrapping around individuals and begin to break down, because there's so many barriers between individuals of different classes, of different economic brackets, all those sorts of things. So what we really want to do is begin to break down those barriers. And that's why we call ourselves One City Peterborough, right? Is that idea that we are one city. And we could pretend like we're not. We could pretend like what I do doesn't affect someone else, but the reality is it does. And so we want to begin to live as if that's the way within our organization.
I'll full disclosure, I'm a real estate agent, so I'm especially fascinated, obviously, with that aspect of One City and your programming. And you know, we work with realtors or with landlords, and we know, you know, I think people go into the landlord business wanting to make money, wanting to have this
Mhm.
profitable investment. So, is this a tough sell? How are you approaching landlords, and how are you selling the program?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because it's been remarkably not a tough sell.
Mm,
Because what we do is we're not asking anyone to lose money, right? We're not asking anyone to, but they will be making a little bit less on their investment, and that's we don't undersell that, but people are still paying rent. People, you know, those sorts of things are still happening, and so what we're basically saying is you're going to make a little bit less on this, but you also are going to have less of a headache because we're basically taking most of the trouble. But I have to say that those who have been most interested have been smaller landlords, right?
mm.
So we had one woman, um, she liked the model so much that she divested her money from the stock market and instead invested it in this home. And so this is her investment, but at the same time, her investment is she knows she's investing in her community as well, that people are housed as a result. And we have another individual. She owns a couple houses and she wanted to be giving back to her community with it. So that's what we're seeing is individuals who want to, they say, I've got this. I don't need to make as much as I could make off of this. And I see it as both an investment that I'm making a bit of financial return, but more so an investment in the community.
I guess, I mean, if they're still making an investment, but I mean, is there a possibility for future landlords to maybe be eligible for certain grants if they participate in this program? Or are you working on things from that end to try to make that possible?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, those are always things we're exploring. And one of the things that we're pretty committed to is not growing bigger than we can handle.
Mm.
And so we're not looking at building an empire here, but instead finding houses. And by choosing 4-bedroom houses, obviously your return is less. But we just know that they're also easier to manage. So that's why we chose that. But yeah, that's what we're trying to do is look for different ways. So we're always looking for grants and those sorts of things to make that happen.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Christian. We're going to take a quick break and then we're going to come back. We're going to talk a little about how your work has had to change recently in these, you know, strange and uncertain times. Obviously, people who are dealing with people in the homeless community and on the margins are dealing with additional challenges in because of COVID-19. So I want to talk a little bit about that in moments when we return to Zooming Around the Town on your TV.
We'll be okay. There's a brand new day.
Welcome back to Zooming Around the Town on your TV. I'm Catherine Hanrahan, and today Christian Harvey, the Executive Director of One City Peterborough, is joining us. One City Peterborough helping a number of people in our community who are either homeless or transitioning out of homelessness or reintegrating back into society from the prison system. So every organization right now is obviously dealing with another level of challenge, and that's with COVID-19. But I would imagine it's especially challenging with the homeless community to keep, you know, it's really challenging to socially distance when you haven't got a space of your own. So how has COVID-19, what are you guys doing now to deal with that's had to change in your practice?
Yeah, I mean, we've had to put certain things into place. You know, visiting the houses that we support, we've had to be careful there. But I think one of the things that we're seeing most, one is that it's really hard to social distance when you're dependent on food from various food programs. So what we wanted to do, and we've partnered with One Roof Community Center, and the through funding through the United Way and Community Foundation, what we've started doing is offering grocery packs to people who do have some sort of kitchen facilities, but maybe aren't able to afford groceries. We've been offering grocery bags so that they don't have to utilize one roof as much, so that those individuals who have no kitchen facilities, who are living in homelessness, that they have that one roof has less people there, so there is more of a chance to social distance. So that's one thing we're doing. So every week we hand out about 100 grocery bags to individuals to give them a chance, so that social distancing is a bit more realistic for them. One of the things we're hearing a lot about is struggles with access to water and washrooms for individuals who are experiencing homelessness, right? So when so many programs have shut down, libraries, all those sorts of things. So public washrooms are closed down. So individuals really have no access to washrooms, have no access even to water. And these two things that all of us, I mean, they're rights, we need them to exist. And that's one of the things that is concerning, I think, and we as a community need to begin thinking about. Now, hopefully things are going to be reopening soon, but if that's not the case, we really have to say, how do we make sure that everyone has access to water, everyone has access to public washrooms?
We know the city has set up a shelter for homeless people at the Wellness Center, but near Fleming College. But now that the weather is warming up, are you starting to see or notice people who are choosing to camp outside or live rough?
People are going to, and I think we'll see an increase in that happening. And not because, and that's, I don't think any judgment necessarily on what's happening at the Wellness Center at all. But I think that what is happening is people who have experienced homelessness or who are experiencing homelessness want to be seen. They're sick of sort of being hidden and us in society able to ignore that they exist. And so I think camping for some has allowed, say, look, we exist. You can't ignore that we're here anymore. That was, I think, one of the things that happened last summer, was that people were seen again. And because it was interesting, it wasn't like, I mean, Tent City really started July 1st, but it wasn't like everything was good until July 1st, right? Like there was no homelessness, and then all of a sudden there was homelessness, right? It was just, we could see it. The problem actually hadn't changed at all. And so that's one of those things of people saying we will no longer be hidden. And I think camping can be part of that. Also, I think that some people are considering, hey, you know, if we're supposed to social distance, camping's a much easier way to social distance than living together, even in a larger space such as the Wellness Center. So I think people are choosing to, and that will be a reality this year.
Do you think that Tent City in Victoria Park last summer, do you think it did have an impact on how, not only how the city is dealing with the homeless crisis, but even just how citizens in general are seeing it? Have you noticed a change?
Some for the better and some for the worse. I think it did. I think when marginalized people say, we need you to take notice of us, it makes a difference. But they also did that at great cost to themselves, right? Because there was a lot of negativity thrown their way, and I think that's too bad. So a lot of people, some people were made aware of the issue, and some people really began to scapegoat those experiencing homelessness even more. But I think one thing that I heard over and over again last summer was, you know, whenever someone was saying kick them out, it was people saying, where do we go, right? That was the call, is where do you want us to go? And I think we need to continually hear that voice saying, where do we go? And it can't just be shelters. Let's give very real ways where people can live dignified lives.
Tell me a little bit about funding and fundraising. Where does your money come from?
Yeah, so we have we have a couple contracts, especially with our programs that help people reintegrate from prison, we have contracts with the federal government, so that helps us run. Haley House runs COSA, because that we're part of a COSA is part of a movement across Canada that's looking at creating safer communities. Our housing models are funded through partnerships with the landlords. So we get paid a little bit by landlords to do the agent of the landlord sort of property management part. And then fundraising is a huge way in which we engage in that allows us to do the work we're doing. So reaching out to things. We also are really grateful to organizations such as the United Way, which is a major funder of ours, and an organization called FaithWorks out of Toronto, both of which are very generous funders of ours. But we are always looking for people to join us in our work through both volunteering and through financial donations. So we would love to have people join us in either way, or both. You know, you don't have to do one or the other. You know, you can do both.
Is it challenging to maybe convince people to donate money? And I'm thinking especially of the reintegration services. I think I would find that personally kind of a tough sell, like with people coming from the prison system back into society. And I would think there would be a little bit of hesitance on people's part. How do you frame that?
Well, I think, again, it's one of those things, similarly to homelessness, it's one of those things of where do people go, right? Like when the answer is just not here, it doesn't actually solve any of the issues. So though reintegration is hard, we have to look at the things of how do we actually know that when people are made a part of the community, the more that we begin to integrate people, to accept people, to include people, is the safer the community becomes, right? And so that's what I would want people to hear, is that we want to support individuals because it's better for them and it's better for all of us, right? And it's a hard one to remember, and it's a hard one to wrap our heads around. But if you think of it, we whenever we're lonely or really feeling those heavy things, that tends to be when we make our worst decisions, you know, whatever those things may be. And so when we have things that inhibit us making those bad decisions, like people who we love, like people who are investing in us, like a community who believes in us, we're less likely to do those things. So that's how I present it. And no one is only the worst thing that they've done, right? And that, I think, is really important to hold, is that often we define someone by this worst thing that they've done. That doesn't mean it's not there, and that doesn't mean we don't want to address it, but that's not all someone is. And what I want to do is explore and support someone in figuring out those other parts of who they are and let those flourish.
Has your approach to fundraising had to change at all because of COVID-19? Has there been an online campaign or anything like that?
You know what? People have continued to be quite generous, and we're really grateful for that. So we continue to reach out and rely on people fundraising. Again, events aren't something we can do right now, but I've found that individuals have realized that and been really compassionate around that, and we are really grateful for people, especially around. We did a special request for funds to provide the grocery bags right when the COVID issue began, and we had a really great response. And so that's not part of our general fund to operate. That was just people giving money for groceries. But people are quite generous in this time, of which we've been very grateful for.
Before we wrap up, Christian, recently there was a pretty prominent member of the downtown community who passed away, Andre Bellini. And if people watching, you might know him. He was well known as the friendly panhandler downtown. There has been a huge outpouring of emotion and support for him. What's your impression on that? As someone who works so closely with the homeless community, how do you see that huge outpouring of love for Andre?
Two things, I think. One is that it's so beautiful because he was such an amazing man, right? And so for him to be remembered for being an amazing guy, a kind soul, and you couldn't come in contact with Andre without realizing that. The other side is that I think that sometimes we have a role that we want those who panhandle to play, and if they don't play that role, we don't want to hold them up. And so there are so many people who are experiencing panhandling, uh, who are engaged in panhandling, who also have amazing sides, but we often forget that because they have issues. We want individuals who panhandle to be a certain level of grateful to us. We want them to say certain things. We want them to dress a certain way. We have an image of what we want panhandlers to be, and if they do that, we're okay with it. And if they don't, then we see them as a nuisance, and often even talk about them as if they're trash or as if there's something to be cleaned up. And I think we should take this time to realize, both, let's remember Andre, because Andre deserves to be remembered, and every single one of the individuals who are panhandling are people who deserve to be remembered and cared for and loved and are a part of our city. And they're not, when we find ourselves using language that normally we would use around garbage and those sorts of things, like let's clean up the downtown, those sorts of things, we need to really check ourselves and say, these are people we're talking about. They're people who have gifts, who have strengths, who have struggles, but they're people. And how do we remember that?
Christian Harvey, Executive Director of One City Peterborough, thank you so much for your time today. And thanks for the important work you're doing in our community. Stay safe, be well.
Thanks so much, Catherine. You too.